Love to hear a Bob White singing his song. See a big buck on a frosty dawn. Watch our kids catch their first bluegill. See 'em laugh and hear 'em squeal. We weren't born into it, but it fits us just right. We thank the Father for his guiding light. We knew we were blessed with this kind of living. That's why we want to keep on giving back to farm life. True North farm life. It's a great life. True North farm life.
Hello, True North podcast listeners. Today is March the 5th. We're here in the broadcast studio. We got Thomas Cooper and myself, Chris Hinkle. How you doing today, Thomas?
I'm doing good, man. We finally got a little bit of rain, so I'm doing even better.
Wow, that's great. Have you? What have you been doing on your farm?
Well, last podcast we talked. We had some burns scheduled. I actually jumped in on a burn on a different property, private landowner there. We burned about 40 acres of some TSI, FSI unit, and my burn was scheduled the day after. And as soon as we got finished up with that, I went back and ran through town and talked to my buddies over at the forestry department, and I wasn't there 30 minutes, and they got an email out and they threw us in a burn ban. So I've been in a burn ban since then, but we finally got some rain, so hopefully they'll lift it and we can get something accomplished.
Yeah, the conditions. It always happens this time of year. It seems like we're always up against it. Whether we're too wet or too dry, or it's just always. But I know with this rain, we're going to get some good burn days coming here in the next couple of weeks. I know it's going to happen. But I was actually at the farm today, and I was planting my fruit trees that I got in. Yesterday I got in 15 fruit trees, and so they're all apple this year. I didn't order any pear; they're all apple, so I got them in the ground and got the tree tubes around them. This is a little bit different process than what I've normally done. I've normally just planted the tree and used a wire cage around them, probably a 4 or 5 foot diameter, and just used that. But now I've switched, and I'm trying the tree tubes. And have you used any tree tubes, Thomas?
I haven't used any tree tubes, but I think I mentioned it, but I have a mowing business as well, and one of the property owners that I have, this lady, she has about, I would say 25 or 30 apple and peach trees, and she actually went to the tree tubes and really, really likes them. I've kind of picked her brain a little bit along with yours. I'm fixing to start the process hopefully next winter on the farm, but I've heard nothing but good things about them.
Yeah, it's fun. It's something different. I actually had my good friend Stanley Baker to the farm with me today, and I don't know what it is about pruning trees, but I get 100% confused every time I watch a video about it. I don't really understand it. So today, Stanley Baker come to the farm with me, and he showed me what he would do and the things that he does to prune trees, and made a lot more sense being there with him at the farm, going through that. So he pruned all my fruit trees. Today, I guess, I don't know, I've got 15 or 20 trees right now, and added another 15 or 20. And I'll tell you what, it does get a little expensive, because if you look at, like this time, I think it was around $40-$50 a piece. So when you start looking at 20 trees at $50 a piece, it starts to add up pretty quick. So you do a little bit every year, and then it don't make it so hard on the pocketbook all in one year, right?
Absolutely.
That's right. So we just keep on. Another thing that I did today is, I installed this temperature gauge in my pond to be able to, and I got it inside my feeder there at the pond, and I can go up there at any point and see what the water temperature is. And so 50 degrees is kind of that mark in which you can start feeding your fish. and so it was today. It was actually 53 degrees, so we're 3 degrees warmer than last week. So we're getting on the right side of that stuff. So I actually turned my feeder on and I did a feeding, and man, they were all coming up to it today. So it's time, man. Time to get them feeders going again for your fish, and getting all that started. That Aquamax MVP is feeding them, and they're happy now. So it's all starting. I actually did get my solar aeration system in this past week. So by the end of March, my goal is to get that installed in my pond, and it'll be 100% solar, no electric powered, and then it actually has a 4 battery pack that will be able to aerate through the night. So it'll be 24/7 aeration on my pond, and I debated back and forth whether I should do aeration or not, and so I finally landed on the point that I could probably get by without it, but this is like an insurance policy, right? We don't drive automobiles without insurance. We don't do anything really without insurance. So with my pond, it's a big investment to me too. And I want the water quality to be the best. I want the oxygen to be right. So I'm going to get the aeration system installed in the next 30 days is my goal, to get it installed before April. But I've got the site location kind of picked out there. I'm going to have to trim just a few trees back. I gotta put cement a pole in the ground for the solar panels to sit on, and but I think everything's going to go pretty well. I got all the parts to do it. Just got to plug and play.
Big things happening over there at the Hinkle Farm. I just need to know, have you read the instructions yet on the installation?
You never do that till the end, Thomas. You know that, right? I mean, it should be only one size of electrical outlet goes in the other, right? So, yeah, it's solar panels for dummies.
Yeah,
and I'm the dummy.
We wish it was that easy. We wish it was.
No, I will read the instructions. It's a pretty expensive system, so I definitely don't want to mess anything up. But it is, you don't have to wire anything. That's the great thing about it. It is truly a plug and play system. So all the connectors are already pre-wired. You just plug them all together. And so I'm kind of excited. They say it should be done in a day. So we're going to try that theory out. Anything else going on at your property, man?
That's it, man. We just getting ready. I feel like I've said it a million times, but just prep for getting this fire ran through. Other than that, just changing some mineral stuff up for the cattle, trying to get them on some high mag stuff. They're starting to chase grass now. Just getting ready for spring, and getting the game plan. Actually, had another consult on a property with the biologist, and it'll kind of tie into what we're going to talk about today. And I guess I'll let you get them started out here on essentially what this podcast topic is what we're going to discuss is kind of how we approach property, and the plans and options that you have when you're trying to essentially make a bang up recreational property to hunt and have fun on.
Yeah, so the question was posed to me this past week that if you had 10 things, what would be 10 things that you would do to help your deer and turkey population? And so I started thinking about this, and going back to the basics, so to speak, on property and property management. But if I had to take the top 10 things, what would they be? So I'm going to start with number 1. Learn your property and fully understand what it is, what it's producing, and what it's not producing. So, when you first buy a property, you walk it, you look at it, you try to understand how the game is utilizing it, the bedding areas, the nesting cover, the brooding habitat, where your quail's staying. all this stuff about your property. But honestly, I'm on year 4, going on year 4 now, and I'm still learning a little bit more every year about my property. Okay, so the first year is a big learning curve. I'll just say that it's not just well, you need to put this stand here, or you need to put that food plot over there. I like to take the first year and learn a lot. Now, I might look at access stuff the first year quite a bit to see how I can get in and get out, without being detected as much. But because if you wait till year 5 for that, you're already 8 years late because it takes 3 years to get it established. So the first year, I really like to work on my entrances and exits to and from the property and the stand locations, that kind of stuff. That's kind of step number 1. But learn the property. You don't know if the deer like to use this particular area. You don't know if they're traveling east to west or north to south. I mean, you have an idea by looking at the sign, right? But until you actually hunt it, you really don't know. You haven't, game camera pictures. I mean, they tell you a lot of stuff, but they don't tell the full story. They give you a snapshot. And have game cameras been known not to take pictures of deer walking by them? Absolutely. It's happened. It still happens each and every day. So, first and foremost, learn your property.
Yeah, 100%. And as bad as if you're a guy or a gal that just wants to jump in the middle of habitat management, I think sometimes the juice is worth the squeeze just to burn a year, like you said, learn it, hunt it, and make mistakes, and then to kind of decide and get a game plan of this next 5 years of how you want to approach it. It's kind of no different than if you're a private landowner and you have one of your private land biologists come out. One of the first things that they're going to ask you is, what do you want out of the property? And you can get all kinds of different answers. Somebody might want more quail, somebody might want more turkeys, or an answer you get a lot is, I want more deer and turkeys. Mm-hmm. Well, if you want more deer and turkeys, there's a method to the madness. And when you're looking at your property, you always want to look at it, kind of from, a bird's eye view and see what, your limiting factors are. Where's my water? Do I have water? Do I have cover? Do I have food? In my part of the world in particular, one of the biggest limiting factors is going to be cover. It's a lot of, it's big cattle country up here. There's a lot of fields just chock full of fescue. There's not a whole lot of, there is some timber, but it's closed canopy timber. And once you've got it kind of figured out of, what the limiting factor or factors are on your farm, then you can formulate a plan and start implementing, whatever habitat practices there. There's a bunch, whether it's FSI, whether it's, burning your timber, if it's overfield management. And, if you go into it and you don't necessarily have a plan, you will feel like you're running in circles. So, the first thing that I tell anybody that is wanting to start this process is, formulate a game plan and then start implementing that. And there's 100 different ways and a lot of help as a private landowner that you can receive in order to kind of start that process. And, whether it be, NRCS or CIP through the Game and Fish, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of dive into that next step that you just started there about, my first property that I worked with the Missouri Department of Conservation was a couple hundred acres in Vernon County, Missouri, and I didn't really know what what kind of help I could get. I didn't even really know what I wanted. Okay, so I just called the Missouri Department of Conservation guy, and he came out and he looked at my property and he's like, well, it needs a lot of work. And I said, yeah, that's exactly right. But that's what I'm willing to do, is to put the work in, And so he said, well, I think with the amount of open land that you have and grasslands, I think I can get you cost share to do this and do that, and pollinators over here, and we can get you some heavier kind of biomass habitat over here, and we can do this, we can do that, and so all of a sudden we started formulating a plan, right? And so I'm like, this is great. It's a plan. Now, how are we going to implement it? And the biggest thing, how am I going to afford to implement it, right? So he informed me that there was a process in which we applied to be selected, and it was a selection process. And he said, based upon the amount of acres that you have, you stand a pretty good chance of being selected for these. It will rank pretty high from what I've seen. So sure enough, I applied, I was selected, and I think there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 acres in that area that I was, restoring, taken out of, woody stuff and even, big blackberry bushes, spraying it, killing it, burning it, and then having a good seed bed to plant in. But that cost share paid roughly $35,000 over the course of 3 years. So think about that. On a 200-acre property, and there was probably 40 to 50 acres that I was really working with on it, $35,000 over 3 years. That's significant. To be able to have somebody come out. I mean, I didn't have anybody come out and help me with it. I did it, on my own. And that's how you can, create a little sweat equity there. You can do it on your own and save a little bit of money and make your dollar go a little bit farther with some of the resources, some of the seed, all that stuff. You can make it go just a little bit further. But checking with, your local private lands biologist, or your, I know Arkansas Game and Fish have a private lands biologist, but also the NRCS offers programs. I know, especially when it comes to timber stuff, they offer some programs there. But, that would be my first step. If you have a property right now and you have not contacted your local your local wildlife not biologist, but your private lands biologist and your NRCS on your property, even if you don't get anything out of it, I promise you, you will learn something from the visit that you didn't know before, and maybe there's a chance that you could get some cost share to do some things on your property that will help you.
Yeah, excuse me, 100%. And let's just say that you went through that process and you get with your local NRCS and you get approved. I know I don't think I'll be spot on here, but I know if you were a private landowner and you was to go speak with the NRCS as far as signing up to be approved for those things, it starts in like October, November-ish, that time frame, to where you can actually put in to apply for that stuff. And if you're lucky enough to get accepted for that and get tied in with a program, the clock essentially starts ticking. I've used this 40-acre piece as an example a few times that I just finished up on this year. It was a 5-year process. I signed up for heavy mechanical fire break on the west side, about 11 acres of FSI, a 40-acre burn, and then a pollinator planting. And there was one more. And it's kind of a new deal. I actually talked to Kelly at the NRCS just the other day, and this will be like, I think mine will be the first. There's a few more in Baxter County, but basically what you're doing is creating essentially a brush pile for escape cover for quail and turkey. And so I started this process, and when I was approved for it, I got a pamphlet that basically just gave me an order in which I needed to do things. So I started with my fire break first. After I started my fire break, I went to my burn. I burned, and then I started my FSI, and just finished my pollinator planting. And the last thing on the list for this year is I've got to put in this brush pile for escape cover. And an extremely important thing that anybody that gets approved for these things that they need to remember, and for Arkansas, in my case, let's just say I finished everything but this brush pile for the escape cover, and I didn't get it finished. Well, a good example is, after I got done with my forest stand improvement, the forester come out and she checked my work. And she made sure I had everything squared away like it was supposed to. After I did my pollinator planting, had guys from the NRCS come out, make sure I've done what I'm supposed to. Well, if I didn't put in this brush pile, and essentially, this was a grant north of $20,000 in total for everything that I've done. Mm-hmm. And this brush pile essentially is going to pay I think about $145, which isn't much in the grand scheme of things. But if I wasn't to finish that, and the powers that be came and checked, and I hadn't finished it, I have to pay a percentage of what they have paid me in total back to the NRCS. So you are on a timeline. You've got to be a responsible landowner. You have to get in there and get after it. You mentioned before there's some people that will actually come in and do these things for you. But whenever you sign up and you get approved, get on the ball. Make sure you have the time squared away to get it accomplished.
Yeah, because you're on the hook.
Absolutely.
Not your contractor that you've subcontracted to do the work, right? It's you, your name is on the dotted line. So that is of the utmost importance. You mentioned time sensitive stuff, like when we talk about when I talked about the first year planting the switchgrass for my entrances and exits, for my my escape, my boundary, my barrier. That stuff has to be planted in a certain time frame. I can't just wait till the heat of the summer to go out and plant it. I can't plant it in the winter. It really needs to be planted somewhere between April 1st and the end of May. That's premier. That's the right time to plant it. And so, we're under time crunches, and and I joke with people when I say, well, this month, this is what I'm doing at the farm, but you got to look at it like that. You got to look at it in time blocks. I know we have 1, 3, and 5 year plans for our properties, but in a year, I'm looking at what am I doing in March. My 2 projects are to plant my trees and to get my pond aeration. Now, we've already burnt, and that happened in the end of February. So if that hadn't have happened already, that would have been on the utmost list in March to do. So it's just different times call for different things that we're doing on our properties, right? And so you look at this calendar, and maybe it makes sense for you just to get a calendar and put it on the wall and say, for the month of March, I'm doing this. For the month of April, I'm turkey hunting. No, but habitat stuff, you got to have a calendar for it. If not, if you just say, I'm going to do it when I get to it, I'm going to tell you 9 times out of 10, you're never going to get to it. That's just the way life is.
Absolutely. Just to tie into, as far as time and certain times of the year that you need to be doing stuff. Anybody that's ever tried to do any type of forest stand improvement or TSI or anything like that, when it's early spring and the sap's flowing, guess what? You've just wasted a ton of herbicide. Even herbicide application for old field management and stuff like that. Spraying 3-CL there's certain times of the year that you have to spray it to get that accomplished, to get a good kill. Prescribed fire, sometimes, whatever, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, you might need a growing season fire. You might need to be burning that in August instead of February. It's all, like you said, extremely, extremely time sensitive. And, when looking at a property here in particular, and I would guess just from talking to local biologists, one thing that I see that is probably the most limiting factor on a farm is closed canopy timber. If it's pretty timber, man, there's a good chance that it's not conducive for wildlife, whether it be from a food aspect, from brooding cover, to just bedding cover for deer. And, there's different ways to go about it too. If I talk to a landowner and he wants more turkeys, well, I'm probably going to take it down to a 50 BA and run some dormant season fires through it until I get it to where, I think it looks like it's, I'm not going to say it looks, but it's the height, the vegetation, the structure looks the way it needs to be. But, then again, going back to time, you start running a dormant season fire on a 2-year interval, you're going to get heavy grass base, whether it be broom sedge or whatever, warm season grasses.
Yeah.
Guess what? You got to turn around and hit it with a growing season fire to generate more forbs.
So let me ask you this, Thomas. In your timber, when you're thinning it, what do you like to do? Now, I know there's mechanical removal, right? I mean, we can go in, we can actually hire a timber company to come in and harvest some timber, or we can go in and we can hack and squirt, or we can go in and physically cut the tree down, let it lay. I mean, what do you like to do on your property?
It goes back to the prescription. It goes back to exactly how I want to utilize it, and what I want goes back to it. The type of wildlife that I'm wanting to use it. Will deer, turkey walk through a closed canopy where it's 120 BA and there's nothing but leaves on the ground? Sure. You're looking at probably, 100 pounds to the acre if you've got a good mass crop. But if you're wanting to utilize it for deer and turkey, I'm going to go in, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to cut every single cedar that is in that stand of timber smooth down. And after and this is just what I've done on my farm. After I've done that, in certain parts of my farm, there's quite a few cedars. That ends up being a lot of slash and a heavy fuel load. So I'll go in and I'll cut all the cedars out, and I'll run a dormant season fire through it, and then I will turn right back around and go in and probably anything under probably 10 inches DBH, it's going. And listen, if it's a white oak, it's going. If it's a hickory, it's going. If it's a mulberry, it don't matter. I'm taking it out. And it's hard to get over the fact that you're killing those trees. It was the roughest, probably one of the roughest things that I've had to do is to get over just like, hey, I'm fixing to go in here and kill some light oaks. Mm-hmm. But you know what? 3 years down the road, after you've got everything, not necessarily the way it should be, but you have taken it from closed canopy down to a 60 or 50 BA, and you start seeing how the wildlife utilize it and how they stay in that particular area. A good example is just the other day, same property with my biologist, talking to a landowner. Closed canopy timber, you're looking at 100 pounds per acre, roughly, maybe. 50 BA, you're looking at 1,200 pounds of forage per acre. Now, you can plant all the wheat plots that you want in my part of the world, but you will never have that type of food. I'm not in soybean country. I'm not in corn country. If you want cover and food and be able to hold, deer, turkey, quail on your property, you better start killing timber and dropping matches.
All right, that's good. That's good stuff, man. It's good stuff. So, for those of you that's trying to follow along, that was actually number 5, timber on the list. So this is really in no particular order, but what I will say is that the top 10 things is what we view as 10 things that we want to implement on our properties. So the next thing would be food plot areas. So we're down here at number 6 at food plots. So just think about that for a little bit as habitat stuff. And I know we live in a day and age of having a pretty food plot, right? There's nothing better. But on the other end of it, when it comes to truly managing your property, food plots fall down the list. They're a nice thing to have, and most people have them on their properties. Nothing wrong with that. It's a good food source, but it's not the main only food source. Somebody plants a 2-acre wheat field in the middle of their property, and they really think that that's going to, feed the deer all winter. It just don't work out like that. Not at all. So, food plot areas, where are the food plots located? Are they in prime areas to be able to get in and get out to hunt? So there's been some really good food plots on properties that I've had, but I could not get in and get out effectively. So in essence, they're kind of like a sanctuary that I can't hunt. So you just got to figure out, and if it's a sanctuary that I can't hunt, I might rather have that for bedding than a food plot, right? So, you just got to think about them kind of things long term on your properties. Is the food plot areas, are you pulling soil samples on your food plot, or are you planting your food plot and it's looking just so every year? You can't really figure out what it is. Well, pull that soil sample, figure out if it's lime deficient, if it needs a boost of nitrogen, whatever it may need, and give it that boost. You'll really see the difference in your food plot the next year or even that year. And I did say where are the best places for food plots. So it might not be a place that's currently open on your property, but you got this dream, or in your plan you say, year 2 on that ridge over there that's just a big, nice, long ridge. I want to put a food plot on that ridge. Well, think about things. How are you going to get in there? How are you going to get out? I've been able to utilize and design and make a lot of good food plot areas on wooded properties. And how I do that is, we come in and we take the timber out of the opening, right? You got to remove the timber to be able to get a food plot in there. So we'll have, the dozer in there, and he'll be removing timber. And what are you going to do with that timber? I mean, yeah, you might be able to sell some of it, but most of it you're probably going to push off in the holler and light a match one day, right? But what I like to do is I like to windrow that timber, push it up in certain ways, and if I've got a blind, that I'm putting an elevated blind, I'll push it up to where I can walk right behind that standing timber. The deer will never see me come into the plot, and I can step right into the stand without being detected whatsoever. So utilize that kind of stuff. It's not just trash that you got to put in a holler. I mean, yes, it might not look the best stacked up there, but just think about this. Deer, we can direct them where we want them, right? And that's what you're doing. When you put that barrier up, they're not going to jump over it. They're going to go around it. So now you can predict where the deer are going to come from, and they're going to be in front of you. And when you hunt it with the right wind, you're setting yourself up for success. So, with your with your stands and your food plots, you just got to think about things thoroughly and how you're getting in and how you're getting out. If somebody can stand 50 yards, 100 yards away from your tree stand in your food plot and watch you walk through the food plot and climb in it, that is not a good thing. Okay, I'm just telling you, it's not a good thing. You better be thinking about a better way, moving your stand to a different location, because inevitably, when you get ready to get down on that food source, and we know it's all happened, you got 20 does and 3 bucks out there in front of you, and one of them's the shooter buck that you've been waiting on for the whole year, and you got to get down because it's dark, right? So what do? You spook them out of the field. Now all of a sudden you never see them again in the plot. It's a bad thing. So you got to figure out ways to get in, get out without being detected, and that's just a big part of it with your food plots.
Yeah, and is there anything worse than blowing deer out? You know,
I hate it.
Oh, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. But I think we're on number 7 here, and I think it's one of those things that it was overlooked by me quite a bit, because I'm lucky enough to have a water source on my property, and several of them. I've got 3 springs on the property, several, I shouldn't say several, 4 or 5 ponds. So it never was really an issue for me. But I think one thing that goes overlooked a lot, especially for guys trying to purchase property to hunt on, is, does it have any water? There's a particular case. I had a buddy that he had bought 130 acres or something like that here in kind of the northeast part of the county, and it was a bang up property. Had all kinds of wildlife on it. Big deer, had turkeys, had everything. But one thing that it didn't have a water source. And the only water source, after looking at it on an aerial, the only water source was literally across the highway. And it was, I think it was probably 700-800 yards or something like that. And my buddy, he kind of, he noticed that early season, there was a little bit of discrepancy on bucks on the property, and whether it be at a certain time of day or they just wasn't there very often. And had 3 or 4 cameras on the property, and the pictures would kind of die out. And this is not this wasn't a recommendation by me or anything else. It was he was lucky enough. He had a brother that was a pretty good hand on a skid steer. Had him actually clear out a couple of food plots, and while they were there, he was like, "Throw me in a water hole right here." Mm-hmm. And it wasn't very big. It wasn't big at all. It looked like a big mud puddle, but it held water. It might have been 2.5 foot deep or something like that. And he set a trail camera up on it, and it was unbelievable at the amount of pictures that he got over just that water source.
Wow.
And and I think that is one thing that really does go overlooked. And there's I shouldn't say a million, but there's several different ways to have a water source. Anybody that watches YouTube or any type of outdoor television, there's tanks. You can put in a pond. You can do anything, but it's definitely it's definitely a limiting factor when you don't have it.
Yeah, in southern Missouri, and I'm talking mainly like McDonald County, there are more $5,000 holes dug in the ground than there are ponds. It's to the point that you just never know when you go to dig a pond if it's going to hold water, truthfully. But now, people have come up with these pond liners, right, that you can put down in it's not going to be like a 3-acre pond, don't get me wrong. It's going to be a little watering hole, kind of like what you're saying, maybe a 20-foot, 30-foot area around, that water drains to that. but the pond liners have been working pretty well for people. I've seen them work really good, and you don't have to have just a whole lot of heavy equipment to dig out a hole that size. So with a skid steer or front bucket on a tractor, something like that, you can get to work on it and make a decent water hole for you on your property. It's water is like we always say, water, food, and cover, right? And so I dug the pond on my farm a couple years ago, but it really wasn't because I needed water. I mean, I wanted a pond to be able to fish and recreate, that kind of stuff too, but it wasn't because I needed another water source for my game. I mean, they still utilize it, but I had this other pond, and I've got a creek that flows through the property too, but I had this other pond that is kind of centrally located on the farm, and it's probably 1/10 of an acre, not very big. I haven't waded out in it, but I bet if I did, it wouldn't be over waist deep. But man, it gets utilized. I do know that. A lot of deer come to it, and especially during the rut, because it's kind of thick around it, and there's all kinds of big scrapes and rubs all around it every year. The same thing. So, I think we've talked water enough. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. But what is your access like to your property? Is it only from one direction? Could you talk to a neighbor and you've always wanted to come in on that southeast corner of your property, but you never had a way to really come in? Is your neighbor on your southeast corner a farmer that doesn't hunt, and he says, "Hey man, can I walk down that fence line to get to that southeast corner?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, man, have at it. Go do it." Access to your property can make or break you. If you've got to walk through the middle of your property to get to the spot you want to hunt to the back, your neighbors are probably going to enjoy you on your property more than you will. So access to your property is something that when you're looking to buy a property or you're looking to how to hunt it better, access. Figure out a better way to get into stands. Figure out a better way to hunt your property. Just keep working on your access. Is it only from one direction? Is it only from the north when you have a predominantly northwest wind on your property? It's just things that you need to look at when you're purchasing a property, because sometimes access things are hard to fix. And that's why I say, from an investment standpoint, if you can have multiple ways, and some people look at it differently too. They're like, well, I don't want, I wouldn't want 2 roads on my property. I only want 1 road. And I get that part, because road hunters are a thing. You only want one way that they can see it from one direction, or maybe no direction. Maybe you want it at the end of a dead-end road, and that works too. But at least on your property, do you have a perimeter trail around the outside edge, to where if you've got this particular wind, you can take that perimeter trail to where you're not blowing everything up in the middle, right? What's your thoughts on that, Thomas?
No, I agree. If as far as access goes, one way in and one way out is not necessarily the greatest thing. At certain times, I guess it would be okay. But you take my farm for example. It's a lot longer than it is wide, and in order for me to access some of my property, and access starts from the south. In order for me to access some of my property, especially, here's a great example. On the north end of my property, I'm absolutely wasting my time trying to morning hunt whitetail, deer. Like if I access this 80 acres of timber on the north end of my property, I blow deer out every single time. And unfortunately for me, there's no other way around it. So I'm kind of in a bind. So therefore, and I learned it the hard way. You keep trying to access this piece of timber on the north end, and guess what? Between this patch of timber in the north end, there's about a 4-acre food plot. And you know what that, especially whether it's early season or late season, you can't balk. You can't even begin to even think about entering into the field to access this 80 acres of timber, because it would be great to be able to hunt it in the mornings, but it's not feasible. But if I had access around to the north side, it would be great. But I agree with you 100%. If you can get and establish a trail system, and you have the ability to access your property from multiple sides, depending on wind direction, it'll make your life so much easier if you're there to hunt.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the next thing on our list is build the resume. Build the resume on your property. What does that actually mean? What it means is the game camera photos that you get, the pictures that you take of your switchgrass coming up, the videos that you take out in the field. Build the resume for your property, because like it or not, a property is an investment, right? And one day you may think about selling that property and buying another one. And when you do, if you don't have the resume for that property, it won't be worth as much. And if you do have the resume, a buyer will really appreciate that, and your selling experience will probably be much shorter because you've done the right things to build the resume on your property. I know for every farm that I've owned that I have a file on my computer that I continue to save videos anytime I'm doing controlled burns on my property, anytime I'm getting, if I get like today, I got a picture of 3 longbeards all together, right? I mean, beautiful, strutting. I save that picture because it's one that I'm going to save to go with the farm. Not that I'm selling the farm, but one day I might look back at that and say, you know what? I remember that turkey from that year, or I remember that deer from this year. Look how he's grown from this to this to this. I can track him from year to year. And so building that resume on your property is something that's very special, and it will help you learn more about your property, learn more what areas that the deer like to use more, because once you notice that by that big oak tree, you've got 30 pictures of giant deer there year after year, you're going to finally put a stand in that big oak tree. I promise you.
Yeah, and not to mention, the trail cam footage, and this kind of goes back to guys that geek out on, especially whitetails, because you see it a lot on that. Not only, the trail cam pictures are awesome. You talked about, your soil samples, everything like that. But, if you're not weighing your deer and pulling jawbones, you're missing out on a lot of data. And, I'm not fixing to get into the details of it. I can promise you can call your local private lands biologist, and he can give you he will probably send you a PDF and a spreadsheet for certain data points on deer when you kill them. So a prime example, and I just started this recently, and it kind of goes back to tell you how your herd health looks. I'm weighing every deer that I kill. I'm pulling jawbones. I'm aging things. And, if I have questions and I don't know something, I pick up my phone and I call my biologist. And I say, hey, man, this is what I got going on. Or, hey, man, do you care to come and look at these jawbones that I pulled, and we can age them together? There's a million different resources for guys that kind of enjoy that type of stuff. And not only, it's cool. I enjoy and I love doing all of it. but you learn a lot about herd health and where your deer are at particular times of the year.
Yeah, 100%. Build the resume on the property, collect as much data as you possibly can on the property, and just keep learning. The next thing on our list is trail systems. A property that does not have sufficient trail systems suffer greatly from access, and also, when you, let's just say that you own a 100-acre piece of property and you've got 2 trails on that property. Well, we can drive them 2 trails in about 15 minutes. And so, first of all, that means there's a lot of area on that property that you cannot access. And if you cannot access it, that means, I'm not saying it's useless, but it's not being used. Okay, so the more trails that you can have on your property, the better. It doesn't mean you have to drive down every trail every day. It's not saying that at all. But if you can access every corner of your property, if you have a boundary, a perimeter trail around it, and you have cross trails. I remember one particular property that I took a client on the other day, and it was 200 and some odd acres. And we spent, I'm going to say, about an hour going down the trails. Think about that. 200 and something acres, an hour. And when we got done with that, he said, listen, that's the biggest 200-acre property that I've ever seen. That's what he said to me. And it felt that way. He said, listen, it feels like 500 acres. And that's what you want from a client. That's also what you want from a property owner. You want to be able to access a lot of different places on your property. You want to be able to get in, get out. And, if you have that deer that runs to the bottom of that ravine, you want to be able to get to him without, having to winch him out. So, access, trail systems, that's right up there with the top of everything.
Trail sale.
That's right. That's right.
And then, I think the final one we need to go over, number 10, is checking in with your neighbors, developing a relationship with your neighbors, and having a good relationship with your neighbors. I'm fortunate enough to have a extremely good relationship with all the adjacent landowners there at the farm, at the main farm, and then the piece on the highway, and and I didn't really necessarily develop that until I started burning my property, because by law, like if I'm going to develop a burn plan for my property, one of the things that entails is calling adjacent landowners and making them aware of what you got going for that day. Hey, Chris, I've got an 80 acre unit that I'm fixing to burn today. I just want to make you aware, let you know nothing's going to get out of control. This is who I'm going to have on site. And what I noticed is when I was having those conversations, not only was, a few of them, they were pretty intrigued by that. And they started asking questions: why, when, where, what's going on, and once they understood, what I was trying to accomplish on the farm, and on top of that, making them aware to make sure that hey, if anything goes south, what's going on. I have personnel on site to take care of it. That relationship got a whole lot better, and it not only did it get a whole lot better, it turned into hey man, if you shoot a deer and it jumps over there, just, have at it. Mm-hmm. Oh, if you want to take your boy over there, and, if you hear one gobbling over there, you can take your son over there, and it just kind of snowballed to, extremely good relationships with the adjacent landowners. And I've heard horror stories about, bad relationships between property owners, and I don't know if any, I'm just glad that I have good relationship with my adjacent landowners.
Yeah, 100%. if you can make good with your neighbors, it's always the best policy to make good with your neighbors. I'm blessed with good neighbors too, and not every farm can I say that. And sometimes you don't know it till you get into it. Just like it or not, you figure it out later. But anyway, it's neighbors can make or break a property, no doubt. But hey, man, I appreciate everybody today. Hopefully, we've answered some questions or we've touched on some things that's made you think a little bit more about your property. And if you want to buy a property and you're wondering what to do with it to make it better, I think we've covered some really good topics today on how to do that and how to go about it. But until next week, guys, Chris Hinkle, Thomas Cooper here, True North. We're so proud to be with you, and give us a call if you need our help, assistance, or if you want to just talk properties. We're here for you. Take care, guys.
See you guys.
We love to hear a Bob White singing his song. See a big buck on a frosty dawn. Watch our kids catch their first bluegill. See 'em laugh and hear 'em squeal. We weren't born into it, but it fits us just right. We thank the Father for his guiding light. We knew we were blessed with this kind of living. That's why we want to keep on giving back to farm life. True North farm life. It's a great life. True North farm life.